Hey everyone, I'm Rather Incoherent, and this is one of many big money rogue decks. There are two variants of big money decks, both obviously generate huge amounts of money, but the difference is that one type of deck, the big money spender deck, not the one I'm talking about today, spends that money as fast as it can to leverage cards like Intel Report and Lola Santiago to just get huge advantage very quickly. Generally speaking, I think that's a lot less broken than the big money hoarder archetype, which has been given a lot of incentive over the past couple expansions. Big money hoarders require greater investment than big money spenders. You're going to need to run more economy cards. Things like Double Double are really helpful if you can put that in your deck, because you need to have a huge threshold of money to keep the black fan online. Once you get 20 resources, you're going to have an additional action and +1 to all of your skills. It's Leo DeLuca and Gias in a hand slot. And of course, you can already run Leo DeLuca and Gias, and Well Connected is another incentive to bank your money. Essentially saying, unless you auto-fail, you pass 1 skill check every turn, 2 if you want to spend some money on it. So you have this really clear incentive package, +2 to all your skills, 2 actions a turn, don't fail a check during the mythos round. That pushes you really hard as a class that leans heavily towards one head low sanity. You probably want to consider Big Money Hoarder on pretty much every character. And to me, the hallmark of a Big Money Hoarder deck is this Events 20 pile. Originally, looking at this deck, you might see the lingering afterthought of it. I had one of every card. I was making an Underworld context deck. And what I realized is that Underworld support, that's the actual name of it, is just a trap. Because if you're running Black Market and Easy Marks and upgraded emergency caches, that's already 4 of the 5 cards that you cut were those cards. And those cards either replaced themselves or drew way more than 1 card in the case of Black Market. If you're playing someone like Finn with access to Deep Knowledge, Underworld Contacts is just objectively making your deck less consistent. It makes your deck cost less experience because you're cutting these one-of experience cards like Black Market, but generally speaking, you're going to be putting in experience cards to replace them, so it's really not helping in that regard either. Underworld support, even though I'm only running one-ofs all my assets to save on experience and card slots, just really doesn't help the deck at all. It makes it less consistent and makes the events that are my payoff events way less valuable. I'd only be able to run 1 counter espionage, 1 intel report, and 1 money talks if I ran Underworld contact or Underworld support. I just get the name wrong all the time. And there's just not a reason to run it as a consequence. It makes your deck, it doesn't make your deck more consistent, and it makes your payoff half as good if you're using events. But this shell of cards that Finn is running, it's most of his deck. The only cards unique to Finn are Deep Knowledge, Blur, Milan, and Kirby. Every other part of this can be run in any deck. And as it turns out, that's how I feel almost every rogue is best built. I haven't played Winifred in a while, and it feels really hard to fit big money into her because she wants to have such a high density of skills. So I think with the exception of Winifred, who I still might find a way to build eventually, every rogue has a very strong big money hoarder deck. Bob Jenkins might not look like a rogue at first, but he's just wearing a red trench coat. Don't be fooled, he is a rogue. And like all rogues, he can run the big money archetype. You'll notice that these decks, by the way, tend to be on the expensive side. 57 is a lot of experience. I run Sharon's Obel in pretty much every deck I build. You can argue that that's a bad thing to do, but so far I have never been punished for this, and even if I did die eventually, I think I'd still keep doing it. I view 60-ish experience with a Sharon's Obel to be incredibly reasonable to achieve. I think in most campaigns other than Dunwich, you're going to get pretty close to that, even if you don't ace every scenario. As long as you're getting most of the victory points with a Sharon's Obel, I think high 50s is a reasonable point to aim for. I mention that now because Bob is aiming for 65. This deck obviously costs a little bit too much. I should cut something somewhere. But with cards like Another Day, Another Dollar, there are plenty of things that are just bells and whistles in the deck. You might have noticed that Finn had a Switchblade, so does Bob. This can be a common trend in my decks. When I have +2 to all my stats and a reasonable base fist, Switchblade is just a viable weapon. You're spending 1 card and 3 experience to let your character participate as a meaningful member of combat, and that seems like a really clearly worthwhile investment to me. Another upside to the Switchblade is that being a 1-cost fast asset, it's very easy to play it out of your black market, and if you have things going on like doubling into easy marks, and you're starting to fill up your hand through any means, it's a lot more likely to happen when you have Deep Knowledges in your deck, obviously. Or just like using haste to draw 3 in 2 actions. whenever you're filling your hand like that, it can get pretty awkward in future turns, and just having an asset that's easy to get out of your hand is really helpful for that. But on the whole, Bob's deck looks a lot like Finn's. We've lost the yellow stuff for running the Bob stuff, chairs, keepsake, and bandages and scavenging, but it's a very similar deck. Safina's a unicorn. She doesn't look like any of the other rogues because she's fucking Safina. But the general plan, big pile of events, small pile of powerful setup assets, still holds. It still works in Safina. Trish is one of the most broken big money characters because she's actually good before she adopted the broken archetype. She's able to do absolute shenanigans with the Red Clock, Eldritch Sophist, and Segment of Onyx in addition to big money, and that's pretty much her entire deck. It's just that combo and a big money. Actually, it isn't pretty much the whole deck, it is. The only 2 cards in the deck that aren't either a part of the Segment of Onyx combo or big money are Haste and Occult Lexicon. I think Haste fits into most big money decks pretty easily. It's just an additional action that you use to investigate. It's very good. So really, there's only Occult Lexicon, which is an insanely good card outside of those 2 combos and Trish. I've cut everything else, but she has good enough draw with Black Market and Deep Knowledge and Easy Mark and Emergency Cash and Double Double to just do that. It'll be fine. In the same vein as Trish and Finn, you have Ginny. She's running a similar deck, just far more expensive because Green Man Medallion lets you get away with it. Ginny, unsurprisingly, leans well towards a big money deck. And I think she's a really strong proof of concept for big money. She comes online earlier because of Green Man Medallion. She gets Double Double and Black Fan while upgrading her events, which is way faster than everyone else in the first couple of scenarios because of Green Man Medallion. And that helps her a lot, but Green Man Medallion is actually making her the worst big money character. Rather than gaining 2 resources every turn, she's losing 1, and she's still able to do big money. It's a really strong proof of concept for it. Tony is one of the most aggressively disgusting versions of big money because you can go yellow, just take draw events to make sure you set up faster, and then run the rest of the big money stuff. After you've set up, which Unscrupulous Loan, Another Day, Another Dollar, and Charisma will cover. Speaking of, if this is a final deck, it should have another copy of Another Day, Another Dollar. That's just a lingering effect of having changed it from Underworld support relatively recently, and I miss seeing that. But the Tony deck does look just like the rest of them. Big pile of events to enable big money. The additional cards that hit my colors are just draw cards to set up faster and more consistently. And then I have whatever assets I thought would best allow Tony to do his job, in addition to the big money payoff. And then when we talk about skids, the big money decks look a lot worse. But it's because we're talking about skids. He can still run largely the same shell. And at the end of a campaign, he would actually look like a budget Tony. A really budget Tony, but he would look like it. It's at the beginning of a campaign where Skid struggles. And big money is fundamentally a more late game archetype. There are too many cards in it that involve experience, and that's why I always have Sharon's Obols in my decks. And Parallel Skids largely just looks like the original Skids, but better. Rather than having a bunch of jank blue cards and leaning harder into fighting, I just have a smaller, more consistent deck, and I lean harder towards finding clues. As far as the characters that use big money go, I think Tony's actually the grossest one, because he's supposed to be weak to the Mythos deck, and it negates that. His only real weakness is that the extent of his search is backpacks and prepared for the worst if he goes blue. But that struggle to find a weapon in Tony won't exist, even if all you're running is 1 Switchblade. Because if you go yellow and you run the additional draw, and then you run all the draw that is inherently part of big money, and I do consider Black Market to be core to big money, then once you've done that, you're gonna find your weapon. It's not gonna be a problem. Unlike most of the decks, this is one of the few decks that can run double-double that I didn't put it in. But Borrowed Time with Payday on Tony does a very similar role. You have 5 action turns because of big money with Black Van and Leo, 6 with Haste, 9 with Borrowed Time, 10 with Tony. You can stab a dude 9 times and then play Payday for 10 resources. It's just incredibly powerful to the point where I don't think the deck needs double-double, because you just get so many actions with your Paydays. I feel like I may have glossed over exactly what the big money setup is. So let me go to somebody who has the most generic iteration of the big money setup, and that would be Bob Jenkins. This is the big money setup at its most simple. You use easy marks and emergency caches to generate resources and draw through your deck. You use black market to draw through your deck very quickly. You use Faustian bargains to generate money. From here, there are a couple of different ways you can get some more money, because you will need more money than just that. You can run double-double. It will duplicate your events and be incredibly powerful in a big money deck. It's a great choice, but not all the decks have the free experience or access to 4 green to actually use that. If you have a big initial setup cost, you can just run Unscrupulous Loan. That really helps you, because it just gives you 10 resources up front. You'll never have to trigger its exile by the end of the scenario. That's not a problem you need to worry about. It's essentially just a one-time event that says gain 10 resources, and it helps you initially, much like Another Day, Another Dollar would. And the last thing you can do to get more money really effectively is what Tony does with Paydays, where you have a character that generates more actions beyond the initial 5, and then you use Paydays as an incredibly strong card. If none of those options are available to you, or you still need more money because you're running something like Pilfer, then you'll probably need to rely on Hot Streaks to make up the gap. For Ginny, I had Hot Streaks, and that was because I needed to pay for the Green Man Medallion. It was just too expensive to not put Hot Streak in the deck. Generally speaking, I don't run Pilfer, and the reason I don't run Pilfer is because it just costs too much money. The economy breaks under the strain of Pilfer. Cutting Pilfer for an economy card makes the deck completely consistent, and it's already at such a high power level that I don't even feel I need the additional clues that Pilfer gets. So having established that you have a really consistent deck, you're generating loads of resources, you're drawing through your deck very quickly, what's the payoff? As I mentioned earlier, you run a Leo, you run Haste, you run the Black Fan, and you run Gias. You have +2 to all your stats, you're taking 3 extra actions a turn. That's just incentive enough already, but we're nowhere near done. Because you have +2 to all your stats, pretty much every green character, because they all have High Fist for some reason despite not being fighters, can run a Switchblade. And with just a Switchblade and +2 to all your stats, you're a viable fighter. You can swing at 7, 5 times in a turn, you're going to be able to help in combat. And if you watch my videos, you know that the thing I am most afraid of in terms of losing a scenario is an enemy cascade that my fighter can't handle. So I want these cloovers to be able to spend 1 or 2 cards and a little bit of experience to help in that situation. Switchblade in these decks is exactly that. In addition to being able to fight with just a Switchblade, to all those stat pumps and extra actions, you get some serious payoff events. Money Talks is a ward of protection that only works on skill test and is susceptible to autofail. Counter Espionage is a ward of protection, but better. They both require you to have a lot of money, but this deck should be able to cover that. An Intel Report, well, 2 Tesla's Clues is hard to argue with. 4 Tesla's Clues with double-double is absolutely backbreaking for the game and clearly puts you too far ahead to lose. And if you cycle through all these decks, you see that core setup rarely changes. Sometimes double-double goes out, sometimes Hot Streak comes in, sometimes Payday comes in, but the core idea is almost always the same. Trish and Safina stand out as the ones that really don't have a way of dealing damage, but the rest of them are all running Switchblade. They're all running the same general big setup of economy cards and payoff cards and draw cards. And at the end of the day, I just look at the big money green decks and I have a really hard time justifying not using them. One of the biggest things that pushes me towards big money in every deck, though, isn't just that big money is strong, it's that the opportunity cost to go play big money decks is very low. These are cards that you would just expect to see in a Finn Edwards deck. You handle this one in Savant to deal with his one head, burning the Midnight Oil and Faustian Bargain as economy. Those are just obviously good cards in Finn. You need economy to play your shit. You need to deal with your one head. We've committed 8 cards to that. That's pretty much always happening. You might get different cards. Maybe instead of Savant, you're just running extra allies with Soak, and it's strictly for the Soak. Maybe you're running a Precious Keepsake, and you're using Lonnie to fix it. But you're probably committing at least 8 cards to Economy and Treachery Test on pretty much every green character. So when you come back and you look at how much work it takes to make a big money deck, the opportunity cost gets a lot lower. 8 of the cards in this big money deck aren't even really an opportunity cost to big money, because it was just an opportunity cost to playing a green character to begin with. And that makes it a lot easier to stomach putting so many cards into my deck for this purpose. The biggest argument against big money decks is that you're going to get tired of playing them, not that they're bad. I honestly can't really convince myself that they're not clearly optimal on most of the characters. It's really only Winifred who needs a high skill density, and I guess to a much lesser degree, the possibility of Dark Horse Finn using Mariner's Compass. But beyond those two, I can't come up with good reasons not to play all of these characters as big money. It helps them so much in dealing with their weaknesses. The opportunity cost really isn't that high. And yes, early on, you can't run big money. You're going to be evolving into this. But you evolve into it pretty quickly. You don't need the Black Fan at first. You don't need Gios at first. Just pick up good economy cards like Easy Mark, good draw cards like Black Market. And it gets really easy after that to start upgrading into other things. Anyways, I think that's it for now. I feel like I've mostly talked about everything I've meant to talk about, though I think I kind of rambled a bit and did it all in the wrong order. I hope that the video is still a pretty good case for why I think big money is so strong. And now that I think about it, this is really my second video on why big money is so strong, because my rogue weakness video basically inadvertently became a video about big money being a clean solution to their problems. But regardless, I hope I didn't repeat myself too much. I hope I fully explained why big money is so strong and so easy to slip into as every rogue. And of course, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then like, comment, subscribe. All of that nonsense really helps the channel out. And I'll see you in the next one.